was the third super battleship that they converted because they realized, oh, battleships, they just go out and get sunk. Might be sense to build an aircraft carrier, and it basically sailed out and it got sunk by a submarine.
Yeah.
The Japanese were just not getting lucky.
Welcome to Question History. This is our banter episode. We're still the guys who have none of the answers, but we're going to still ask all the questions. I'm joined here by Gorgie, you know him and love him. We got Nitin from Flashpoint History and Ege from Ottoman Hub History. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good. Kind of getting tired, but I'm
imagine.
still holding up.
I think the audience might be able to tell after we do the rotations a bit. We do the banter episodes like right after the debate episodes.
Yep.
So we just pelted them with, I think, what was it, 9 questions in all?
7. Come on. But yeah, a lot.
Yeah,
and they handled it really good. The both on offense and defense.
But before we jumped into this, I overheard a little bit of talk about travel, which is something I've been trying to look into for this month because, Gorky's getting married. He's going on a honeymoon, and I am too in August. And we were thinking we were going to go to Italy, but it looks like we're just going down south.
All right. Well, if we're talking about traveling honeymoons, let's go. What is your dream, or what do you think is the dream honeymoon destination? Like if you had your pick of the litter, you had all the money in the world, what do you do? But you have a week. Let's not extend it over.
Okay.
Maybe 10 days max.
10 days is like
okay. Let's do 10 days.
10 days is good.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends on the couple, right?
Oh yeah.
Some people they like to go to like Cancun, and that's like heaven. Is having somebody bring you food and whatever else. But my wife is one of those people that if you go to a travel destination and you got to do something physical to walk away from it. For example, we went to Belize. And we had a choice. We were in a place called San Ignacio, which is right on the Belize-Guatemalan border. We had rented a 4x4 to go check out all of these Mayan sites, because there's certain places that you can only get to with a 4x4 up in the mountains.
Yeah.
And one day we had an off day, and I'm like, so what do you want to do? We can head down to the beach. There's a really cool hike that gets up to this waterfall. Or the third option, which she actually came up with, was you go to a tributary of the Belize River, you jump in, you swim up this tributary into a cave, and using only a headlight, you crawl over jagged rocks to the back of the cave where they used to brutally sacrifice the ancient Maya, which is just littered with skulls and skeletons and artifacts. And
wait, you can see them?
Yeah, it's called Aktun Tunich Mukal, ATM, like you go to the ATM to take money out. If you type in that ATM cave, it's now I think a UNESCO site, and it's the name is Mayan. It's derived from the cave of the Crystal Maiden, and what it is there's a skeleton in there, and the water levels would go up and down and would deposit minerals on the bones, and so now this skeleton is covered with these crystals that like glow when you shine light on it.
Wow.
So that would be kind of like our version of fun. That's kind of our thing.
That's certainly unique.
Very. Yeah. I love it. Sounds like a really good time.
Yeah. For us. For other people, it'd be like.
But I only saw iguanas and a few ruins.
How romantic, just reenacting people getting their hearts ripped out.
Yeah.
What about you, Ege? What's your go-to?
I mean, right now for a honeymoon, again, it would differ with different relationships and whatnot, but I think I'll just say Turkey. Why not? Especially if you live in the US, because as we all know, Turkey's economy is in the gutter right now. So I feel like
you're being altruistic. You want to support the local business with your honeymoon.
That and like since a dollar here is 17 lira, it feels like a cheat code wherever
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
I don't know. You could definitely help out the business here.
It's,
Yeah.
And even without the economy, Turkey has so many really, really cool places, and it has this mix. Like you can do the hot air balloons in Cappadocia, which is classic but really good. And last time I was there, so you guys probably heard of Gobekli Tepe, right? it's
Yeah.
it's a baffling place that makes us question the very ideas of civilization. And when we were there, and I forgot the name, I wrote it down somewhere. I think I have it here in my notes, but the guy told us that very recently there's an even older place found in the east. I'll try to find the name, and it's really like in a very jagged terrain, and it's really difficult to get up to. Like again, you need a 4x4. I'll find it for you guys, but
yeah, I'm
no,
looking it up
no.
right now.
Did you find it? It's older than
Yeah.
the Tepe, and so like
It's like
I don't
it's
know.
right. It's the one that's like right on the Syrian border.
Maybe I'm not sure. It has to have a mountain on it, but yeah, I can't find
Yeah.
it now. Yeah, so like
Megaliths, Neolithic period.
not really a honeymoon destination, but my point is that Turkey has so much variety in all the things. You're food wise, you're good. Um, really good stuff. I'm really happy with mine, honestly, in Italy. It
You
we
can't
were
go wrong with Italy, man.
you can go along with Italy, especially like Rome, Milan, Florence. I was really we're gonna do this. We're really considering that quadruple combo of Cordoba, Granada, Malaga, and
Oh,
Sevilla.
oh,
That like,
beautiful.
they're so close to each other. They're so different, yet they have a theme. I feel like 10 days at that thing, maybe jump over to Gibraltar a little bit. You're so good. It's so good. And my third option would be straight up very different, just honeymoon in the Mongol steppe, where we're camping in yurtas, we're
Yep.
riding, we're shooting bows and arrows. It's a good time. It's different, and
Don't
it's
forget
gonna be very
about the
memorable.
deep throat music.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, going back to Turkey real quick. I think
Yeah.
Turkey's like the only country where you can just go on a museum trip, a road trip in general, going from historical places to historical places,
Yeah.
to just going to a beach and going to a ski resort, and it's all in like one country. And yeah, like I really like I might be biased because I'm from Turkey, but I just love my country when it comes to that.
Yeah.
We got
It's a
we
really
got
good
so many like
country.
different attractions for tourists and for our people in general. But yeah, freaking love it.
Craig, what's your go-to?
Original plans before COVID, because I've been trying to get married for this will be the third year. Kept getting
Yeah.
canceled because of our government regulations. Canada went above and beyond. Let's say that much. But wanted to go to Japan. That was my choice.
And
She wants to go to Costa Rica, and she won out. We're gonna go to Costa Rica. She loves the birds, so she wants to go see
Very
parrots.
nice, nice, nice.
And it's
We're
it's
in
actually
Japan.
interesting. Oh, in
Where are you
Japan,
planning?
I had to narrow it down. There's too many places I want to go. Of course, I'm going to spend a few days in Tokyo because you have to.
Yeah,
But Osaka, particularly, Kyoto for the classical inns and stuff. Um, Okinawa, if it's possible, because you can take like
Oh
a
wow.
plane while a domestic plane costs you like $70. So Okinawa
mm,
is
yeah,
dramatically different from the rest.
yeah, definitely.
And I would have to limit it to that. But if I could, I would like to see Hokkaido. And not a lot of people want to go see northern Japan, but it is
Kind of.
pretty interesting. Although I'm
Mm.
Canadian and I've had enough
It's
of
it's
winter.
basically a giant like nature preserve at this point, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hokkaido is interesting. I mean, you got springs with monkeys in them and all sorts of like interesting stuff. Japan is very diverse, despite what some people might think. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
To jump back on the history thing, because you guys said something in the debate podcast that I really want to address, but just so I involve everyone here, Ege, how much do you like or know or are interested in the Crusades?
In the Crusades, well, since I'm a Ottoman history dude,
Mm-hmm.
I tend to read about more of the later Crusades, like
Mm-hmm.
Nicopolis, Varna.
Yeah.
But overall, yeah, I don't know that much about Crusades, like
Mhm.
the first four, but I would like to learn more about them. And I know Kings and Generals are doing a series on the First Crusade right now.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, yeah.
And
This is a
Nitin,
plug-in.
and
There you go.
Nitin, do you
This is-
I've
know?
been watching them lately.
Do you know
I
a
think
guy?
there's.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you know a guy named Steven Runciman?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a writer.
Yes, yes. Um, I am fascinated with this guy, and I read his biography, or at least parts of it, and I think he's so fascinating, and I want to read a little bit of it to you guys and destroy him because I'm conflicted, and I don't know if I hate the guy or I love the guy. So real quickly. Born in Northumberland, he was the second son of Walter Runciman, who's a Viscount of Doxford, so money, rich. And both his parents were or became members of the Parliament of the Liberal Party and were the first married couple to sit simultaneously in Parliament. His father he created a Viscounty, blah, blah, blah. And he was named after his maternal grandfather. Okay, we skip this. So he had said that he was reading Latin and Greek by the age of 5. In the course of his long life, he would master an astonishing number of languages, so that, for example, when writing about the Middle East, he relied not only on the accounts in Latin and Greek, but also in Western vernaculars, but consulted Arabic, Turkish, Persian, Hebrew, Syriac, Armenian, and Georgian sources as well, which you can see in his works.
Wow.
A King's Scholar at
Wow.
Eton College, he was an exact contemporary and close friend of George Orwell. While there, they both studied French under Aldous Huxley. In 1921, he entered Trinity College of Cambridge University as a history scholar and studied under J.B. Bury, becoming, as Runciman has later claimed falsely, his first and only student. At first, the reclusive Bury tried to brush him off, but then Runciman mentioned that he could read Russian, and Bury gave him a stack of Bulgarian articles to edit, and so the relationship began. His work on the Byzantine Empire earned him a fellowship at Trinity in 1927. After receiving a large inheritance from his grandfather, he resigned his fellowship in 1938 and began traveling wildly. Thus, for much of his life, he was an independent scholar living in private means. He went on to be a press attaché at the British legation in the Bulgarian capital Sofia in 1940 and the British embassy in Cairo in 1941. And from 42 to 45, he was professor of Byzantine art and history at Istanbul University, Turkey, where he began the research on the Crusades, which would lead to his best-known work, The History of the Crusades, 3 volumes appearing in 51, 52, and 54. In his personal life, he was an old-fashioned English eccentric known, among other things, as an estate raconteur and enthusiast of the occult. According to Andrew Robinson, a history teacher in Eton, quote, he played piano duets with the last emperor of China, told tarot cards for the King Faoud of Egypt, narrowly missed being blown up by the Germans in the Pera Palace Hotel in Istanbul, and twice hit the jackpot on the slot machines in Vegas. Jonathan Riley Smith, one of the leading historians of the Crusades, denounces Runciman for his perspective on the Crusades. Riley Smith had been told by Runciman during an on-camera interview that he, Runciman, considered himself not a historian, but a writer of literature. There is more, but I want to end it here, and I want to just say to the audience that the Byzantine resurgence in popularity and interest, people have really said that is mostly due to his bestsellers. He popularized the Byzantine Empire in the 50s in such a way that everybody were obsessed with it, and there was a resurgence in it. And maybe a lot of what we know is due to him and the interest that he gathered. But then there's the problem. while the Nazis are bombing London, this guy is in Istanbul and saying that the greatest crime against humanity is the sack of Constantinople. And he is known to have a bias. He's known to come up with stuff. He's known to villainize the Crusaders as barbarians who invaded two civilizations, the more important of which was the Christian one. And he paints with a brush with intent and motivation. And the problem that we have today is that he paints with a beautiful brush. He is eloquent. He writes beautifully, structures it well, and builds a story. It's not just history. It's a story that all of us can relate to. And in that story, you have a clear good guy and a clear bad guy. And I feel like he did a lot of good, but he also did a lot of bad, because he's the originator of the Venetian greed myth. He's the originator of the Crusaders being all bad and misguided. And he relied on a lot of these sources that I mentioned that in the Middle East, but he mostly looked at the Latin sources and saw their perspective, which was written after the conquest of Jerusalem. And he also wrote from a very Byzantinophile standpoint, which you can see, like the guy loved the Byzantine Empire probably more than all of us combined. He was there. He admired it in the 40s. Like, imagine the world he lived in. And he was allowed to live that world because he was rich. He avoided the war. He avoided, financial burdens, and he traveled and wrote. So I'm here asking myself, what do I think about the guy, and how much popular history, what's the role of popular history? Because we need it, because not everyone can be massive nerds, and not everyone can understand the terminologies we use and the rabbit holes we get into. But also, some misconceptions are really hard to take away. The floor is yours.
He's just Herodotus 2.0.
All right.
Sounds the same story. A lot of drama. It's a lot of morals, and it's a lot of bullshit. But Herodotus is the only thing we can go by for most of those stories. Nothing else survived. So if you don't have him, you're missing him,
Okay.
But I mean, for this guy, I'm sure there was a lot more sources, because it wasn't ancient history. So
yeah. The sources he used, most of them did survive, but your point is there. Sometimes a lot of us would never even hear about the Fourth Crusade if it wasn't for this guy to popularize it.
Sometimes people
the
just
sources
want to be
are
entertained, and that's the only way to get a message to them. Dan Carlin, a lot of people don't like that he doesn't go into specifics. I like him, but I admit, he could be wrong about quite a few things.
You kind of need to have people like that, unfortunately, to make something like that. And the fact that he's bringing in as many sources as he does speaks volumes. I think that if he's just somebody that brings in just one perspective and comes up with an answer like this, then you're like, okay, the guy's just a biased schmuck. We don't need to pay attention to what he has to say. Sure, he makes something colorful and interesting, but how far from fiction is that? If you're bringing in all these sources, you have the ability to speak multiple languages. You can live in the areas where the history is viable and tangible. Then it adds credibility to what he has. And some would argue that if he has a perspective that's different than your own, and you can bring to the table the ability to refute him, and I think that builds you up as a person as well.
Because you're up against the greats, and you're holding your ground.
And so to bring this up, when I was doing research for one particular episode where I was talking about tolerance in Islamic Spain, which is it's a hot button item. People are vehemently one way or the other. Very few people are kind of middle of the road. And to make one episode, I read for probably like 3 months, anything I could find to do this. And you realize just how much bias there is out there, and how what he's writing it's more common than you think.
Yeah. Okay. I know this doesn't touch on subjects that you really know, but there has to be scholars like that ring a bell to you.
Well, not scholars in particular, but in the early 2010s, there were many really popular Ottoman shows that aired in Turkey and that became really
Yeah.
popular in the Balkans and like other parts of the world, like Magnificent Century. I don't know if you know that show, but
I haven't watched it. I know of it though. Yeah.
yeah, and then later on, you had Ertugrul, and then you had like other like Ottoman shows, and like even though those shows aren't like 100% accurate, it really revived a interest in Ottoman history in Turkey, at least because
Mm,
before the 2010s, Ottoman history was really how should I say it, really especially like in the older generations in Turkey, it was really looked down upon because the Ottomans were seen as failures,
mm,
especially by the older generations. But now this new generation is really more interested in the Ottoman past, and these TV shows that popped up during the 2010s really um, how should I say it, really reignited
yeah.
just Turkish people just finding about their own history. And this is a good thing and a bad thing, as we all know. You cannot get your history from TV shows,
Yeah.
and like,
Wait, what?
Wait,
oh
you're saying Monty
really?
Python is bad?
Yeah. But yeah, there's like this huge problem in Turkey right now where people can't really know the difference between a TV show and like the actual historical fact,
Yeah.
especially shows like Ertugrul
Like that everywhere
Gazi.
though.
Yeah, but like it's especially bad here in Turkey because most of these TV shows are produced by the government, as you know, and
Yeah.
they have a
It's
really
so
big
tricky.
bias towards certain parts of history, like Abdul Hamid II. Like I don't know how familiar you guys are with him, but the TV show that aired in Turkey about him was really, really positive about him. But
Yeah.
I see him more as a gray character rather than a black and white character. And
Yeah,
I don't know, it's
people
just
love to do that.
whitewashing history for the most part.
And it's so difficult to rewrite those misconceptions. Like I distinctly remember when I was listening to Nitin's episode on tolerance, and that was one of the big shifts in my, like I always try to keep myself dynamic in my understanding and knowledge. And he convinced me. He absolutely convinced me in his arguments. And I asked myself, how many people will get to hear this, and how many people will be able to change their mind like that? And it's a really difficult thing, but at the same time I fully recognize the fact that at the very best, Ottoman history 20 years ago for most people was Mehmed, Suleiman, the fall.
Yeah, basically.
Pretty much, with nothing in between. And there's a lot in between. There's stuff before Mehmed, important, big, interesting stuff before Mehmed, to the point where I found myself at a very later age being like, oh my God, being like, oh, they're Ottoman because of Osman. Who's Osman? Who's after him? Like that early phase, which is so
Yeah,
important and interesting, their connection with the Byzantines, how they played them, skipped out. Like, why was it these two people? And it's like, is it always like this? Is it always someone like Don Carlin or Crash Course History or Monty Python? It like opens up the road for the masses on a historical subject. Now the algorithm likes it. Now that topic is monetizable. Now that topic is
exactly.
misunderstood, but people recognize that, they know those names. And then guys like us come in and they give the details and they give the nuance and they take the black and the white and turn it into gray. And maybe like 1% of all those people are going to listen to us, and maybe that's going to go up. But it's
Yeah,
happening.
You'd
exactly.
hope. You'd hope.
Yeah, it's slow, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, but there have been moments of light, like with the Mongols. Like the Mongols were an incredibly niche topic 20 years ago, but then you had
Now
Dan
it's very
Carlin.
mainstream.
Then you had John Green with his meme that he made, and now it's extremely mainstream. It's more popular than Al-Andalus. Like 20 years ago, that's a ridiculous idea to have. Which is Al-Andalus is also, and the Reconquista is also very important. But judging by the views in the algorithm, the Mongols do get more than the Reconquista.
Oh yeah.
Which again, crazy. And I've always asked myself, like, what's the next topic like that? What's the next thing that blows up?
Hopefully Ottoman history, but I don't know. You never know.
That's right.
Ottoman history is like, it's in this weird limbo where it's now, at least, very popular, but it's not on the top 5, you know? Games popularized it.
Though?
Yeah, because of games.
What do you say?
Yeah, whatever video game is out there, that's what people are going to follow. Because what happens, at least this is for me, I started playing Civilization, those whole series of Civilization games. And that really got me into history because you wanted to figure out how to win.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, so what did Napoleon do at this particular time? What did Caesar do at that particular time? And what innovations? And he's right. Whatever video game is like number 1 out there, you're going to see this mainstream thing, which they just came out with the what is it, the Fate of Iberia, the Crusader Kings.
Yeah.
I applaud that. It's all about Iberian history. I love it.
Games are so powerful. Shows are so powerful. Like, I might be mistaken, but part of me is saying that the reason why the Shogunate period is so popular, a lot of that has to do with the Total War game.
Shogun 2.
Yeah,
let's get it.
A lot to do with that, and that's why
I love those. I love the little death poems that they have in Shogun 2. You know what I'm talking about? Like, if you were a warrior and you had just been like drawn through with a sword, you have to say this poem before you die, and all the poems are really short. Like 3 words long.
Yeah. Craig, what do you think on that with Japan? And more recently, we had the Ghost of Tsushima, right?
Ghost of Tsushima. Yeah, it's a good game, by the way. It was really well made. Japan, like, when it comes to Japanese history, the Shogunate period has always been the most popular, like the Edo period in general, because it's this romantic view of the samurai that's not true. It's completely myth. Like, a lot of it's bullshit. I'm always surprised that the Bakumatsu period is not at the forefront. It's when the East met the West, and they had this really messy kind of like rush in the Meiji period, and it's like you're seeing samurais who are armed with firearms fighting in the streets against other samurai, and it's like the Shinsengumi. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there. But I think like Japan has always come in waves when it comes to like history and what's interesting, and it's always the Tokugawa Shogunate. That's all you'll ever hear about. You'll never hear about like what the like quote unquote the samurai were like before the shogun had come into power, and what it was like, like when they were just horseback archers for the majority of their history, because that's what they really were.
That's the other big fear, that something becomes extremely popular and it just cannibalizes the things around it. The
idea that like of the katana, people think like it's been around for like millennia. No. It's anyways, but it's been made so popular, and it's mostly because of Shambara films. So the Japanese samurai films, that started like in the 50s and 60s, that inspired Star Wars and stuff. Like, that's what got people into it, the Western films with the samurai. But it's come in waves. It's come and gone. It was super popular like in the 50s and 60s. They made so many movies, and then when Japan got really successful economically with the car industry, they put more movies out, and kind of died down. You had The Last Samurai that got like a big rise in people wanting to learn about this stuff. But can't say the same about the Pacific War. It's one of the most uninteresting subjects for people.
And yet there's so many movies about it though.
They went through a craze right after the war into the 60s, and there's even like a really old film on Midway that's pretty good using stock footage from the actual battle. And they got oversaturated. They stopped making them, and then recently they started to pitch with the latest Midway film that I owe my entire channel success to. I had one video go viral, and that's why. But it's not that people are obsessed with the Pacific War. They're just obsessed with specific moments. It's like Hiroshima, Okinawa. with the
Pearl Harbor.
of course Pearl Harbor. Fucking Michael Bay's film was so bad though. God,
You didn't like the love triangle?
yeah,
Yeah, to have that love
Why?
triangle,
the
man.
love triangle in that. It's like, but the Midway film actually did a better job portraying Pearl Harbor than Pearl Harbor did. But I don't know. I would like letters
I
from
really
Iwo
dug the
Jima.
Midway movie.
Letters from Iwo Jima and Flags of Our Father were like, I really liked those. The
Mm.
duality of the Clint Eastwood films, those were good. But nothing's really gone outside of the basket. Like, if it's a naval battle, it's always Midway. It's never Guadalcanal. It's never Leyte Gulf. Never the Philippine Sea. Bigger battles in Midway by far. And when they do the island hopping, it's whatever Eugene Sledge saw. So it's Peleliu or something.
Yeah, I love the Pacific. I'm a huge fan of that miniseries.
Yeah. But I mean,
But yeah.
Band of Brothers, though, even though I'm a Pacific War guy and that's my channel, Band of Brothers was better, I have to say.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess.
He had magic.
Pacific, it got to me after a while. It's like, okay, they're getting slaughtered yet again somewhere. It's I don't know. The first part of it was pretty good, but then after that, it just Band of Brothers kept it interesting throughout the entire way.
There's a quote that came out. I can't remember who someone asked. I think it was a reporter asked. It was a veteran who also was writing books on the Pacific War. And someone asked right after the war, they're like, we have so many books and so many stories from Europe and what happened to all our boys that were in Europe. Why aren't we hearing anything about what happened with the Marines and in the Pacific? And one guy, I don't know, I think he was an officer, he said to them, the Pacific War was an ugly war. And that's what's always stuck to me because no one wanted to talk about it. Like veterans from Europe were so much more likely to actually give stories, but in the Pacific, there was a little bit of a like, why are we fighting kind of idea. There was a lot of racism involved and it was unbelievably gory. Like it was awful.
Yeah, and probably many Americans didn't know where these islands were in the first place. These were just minuscule islands before the war.
Yeah, I interviewed a guy for the podcast and he was living in Guadalcanal. I found that was like insane. He gives tours. He goes out and he finds the battlefields and he finds where some of the men would have got their Medal of Honor. And he has found two places that haven't been found before. So that was interesting.
Wow. What did you guys think of the Andrew Garfield movie, The Ridge?
Oh, Hacksaw Ridge?
Yeah.
Is that the one with the medic?
Yeah.
I never saw that. That's that would always show up and I was like, okay, I can't do it right now.
It's a little over the top, I would say, on like, yes, this guy existed. Yes, he did a lot of things in the film, but I mean, it's a Hollywood film, so it's a little dramatic, but it was very good.
Yeah, I really liked it, but wasn't sure about the accuracy at all.
Well, you're never going to get it 100% right. I'm interviewing the main historian for the Battle of Midway film that had come out. And he said that everything was to a tooth accurate, except for 2 times he wasn't on scene to scream at them. And interviewing him soon to hear what those 2 scenes were. But for the life of me, I can't see which ones they are because it's very well done. Like it's historically pretty on point. There's very minor details that are wrong.
Wow. And again, what did you think about the Netflix edition of The Fall of Constantinople?
I actually really, really liked it. I don't know. Yeah, because usually in Turkish movies, like they portray Mehmet II as this like brave leader. He's like untouchable. He does no mistakes.
Yeah.
But in the Netflix show, like you kind of sense his like childness in him. Yeah. He's like really impatient. He really downgrades everyone around him. And
I hope they continue that series. That was such a good balance of accuracy, but also drama, character arc. Like it was very well done.
That's the Empire series.
That's the thing about Netflix that I'm always worried about is because they come up with things like that, but then they don't do well or something. They came out with that Marco Polo series, which granted, there's a question of whether he actually existed or not, but they never continued it, and they spent so much money to make it look so good. The cinematography was fantastic, and yet it just ended. The Ottoman, I think it was supposed to be part of a bigger series, because it was Fall of Empire or something, Fall of Civilization, or there was a bigger
Yeah.
umbrella
Yeah.
title, and then there was nothing
Yeah.
beyond that, and which is kind of unfortunate because you're right, they did it so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the Turkish production that was in charge of it, I think.
Hmm.
Many of the actors were Turkish. All the sets were basically set in Turkey. And
So
I
the
guess,
algorithm decides everything.
I thought I
yes,
heard they
yeah.
were following it up with something, but it was something completely different. I can't remember what it was, but I think the Empire series is continuing.
I'll
hope
check
so.
while you guys keep talking, because I'm very curious about this. Because it's been a long while. Like,
It has been
I
a
know
long
there
time
was a
for Netflix.
Roman docu-series
There was a
on
Roman
Netflix.
oh,
docuseries.
how about Rome? HBO's
It
Rome
was
being
like 3
canceled. That
seasons.
was
For its
What a
day.
That was
it
painful.
good, yeah.
That was painful. That was
Oh,
painful. That was
yeah.
such a great series. I watched that every once in a while too. It's just
it's so
like
good.
it's up there with Band of Brothers. It's just like something you want to have on
I
sometimes.
remember someone called it like, I mean, they were associating it with The Sopranos because it was HBO and stuff, but it was like the new king of HBO at the time.
I don't
Yeah.
know. Like I watched it way after it was gone, and
Yeah, me too.
what a good gem.
Yeah.
It was just too expensive at the end of the day. And I don't know, didn't get that many ratings.
And the last episode was
Unfortunately.
like super rushed, and it still managed to be really great. Like the show creators said that they rushed it because of the studio. Like their plans were different. They wanted to add more, and you could even feel it at some points. It was rushed.
I think
But
halfway through season 2, HBO told the director that like
Mhm.
this was the last season. So like the last half of season 2 was just completely rushed. Because in the first half of the season, you have like many hints of future seasons. Like you have a king of Jerusalem showing up at Anthony's office. And there's like many other like small like hints of like future stuff to happen like in future seasons, but it never really happened,
And they had
unfortunately.
to edit. Can you imagine how much stuff actually ended up on the cutting room floor because of that? Like all of the plot that they had originally created. It's
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was King Harold, wasn't it? The tyrant king of Jerusalem.
yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong with the name, but yeah, he was going to be showcased in season 3, but yeah, unfortunately, the show got canceled before then.
Well, so did the Rise of Empire, boys. It's not officially canceled, but the contract has not been renewed.
It's in limbo. Yeah.
It's stuck in
Yeah.
limbo, and if there was a good audience reaction, they probably it probably would be renewed. Like I get so scared. Like I watched Arcane when it came out, and it blew me away. I know it's not historical, but when it came out, it's the best animation I've ever watched, one of the best stories, one of the best series I've ever watched. And I was sitting there watching it at episode 4, and I was like, what if not a lot of people watched it? And it ended up breaking multiple Netflix records at the time. And instantly, like by the end of the season, Netflix already confirmed there's going to be an Arcade season 2. And I had a deep sigh of relief. But what if not? That season was already produced, so it was already made by this French studio, and it's a masterpiece. And all the ratings, audience, reviewers, everyone rated a masterpiece. But for some reason, if the algorithm didn't pick it up, and if people were too busy watching Squid Game, which was out at the time,
It dethroned Squid Game, which was already the colossus that had, come out.
it's crazy how
Yeah.
well it did, and I'm happy that it did. But
Oh yeah.
Netflix, movies, our channels, this podcast, everything is at the mercy of the algorithm. And it would be nice to have like a manual to know exactly what works, but you can't.
Well,
We're at the
you
mercy
can have
of
a bit of a manual depending on your circumstance, but yeah.
a bit, but sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle, sometimes
Yes.
COVID happens, and there's so many factors, and the audience sometimes can be a little fickle, but
Yeah.
it's also what makes it so interesting.
I think I don't know if
because you never know what's going to happen.
You don't. Maybe your next video will go viral, and you will skyrocket. Happen to multiple channels.
Was it the last podcast? I don't know if it was you who said this, Gorgie, but you were saying along the lines, you need to make something like that, something that's historic that
Mhm.
no one knows about a place that they know. Like you can't
Yeah.
just go make something about, I don't know, the well, any kind of culture that's kind of lesser known. But if you
Yeah.
make something on Alexander the Great, but you find something no one knows about him, people will flood to it. That's kind of like the
Yeah.
model.
Alexander the Great's last meal, like something
Yeah.
like that.
Alexander the
Yeah,
Great's
yeah.
sexuality, which
You
Yeah.
gotta
someone is
take.
writing.
I feel like you gotta take something that's very known. That's the path has already been
Yeah.
cleared by the crash courses, the big boys, and then maybe extend it or like go in depth. That's one way to go, or you can extend it further. What happened after Alexander, or what happened before Alexander? And that was my mentality for the First Crusade, which starts way back with Manzikert, which is something people know. But between Manzikert and between the First Crusade, you actually get incredibly interesting piece of history, like Empress Zoe, the one of the three empresses at the same time.
But to
And
get to there is
Yeah.
hard. It's
that's
hard
one
to
of the
get
ways.
people to go down a rabbit hole, especially in something
Mhm.
they don't have a background in or not they don't know anything about. That's where
Yeah.
it gets tricky.
And then with the Mongols, like I wrote the Mongols and it hit, that was the lightning in a bottle thing. Because we didn't start from something that people knew. We started from Yehuling Pass. What? Just like some battle with China, and then we moved on to this and that. And at the time, even the Battle of Mohi and Legnica were popular because they happened in Europe. That's literally the only part of the Mongols that people kind of knew because it had impacts. And then the second most popular one was the Battle of Kauka River, right? No brainer, those will be the big episodes in the series. If Nitin, Ege, you probably are thinking this as creators because it makes perfect sense. You know what doesn't make perfect sense? That the most popular episode in that series is the second episode where they take down the Charismian Empire, which at the time was a period, a Mongol conquest a lot of people didn't really knew. They knew Baghdad more, they knew Kauka more, but for some reason, even though the second episode always is like in limbo, it's not as good as the first, definitely. For some reason, the second episode didn't just do well, it did really well, a lot better than the rest. So
It's
you
a
never
little
know.
hard to know though, because sometimes when you have an esoteric topic like that, it's a little hard for people to engage. Or you get the exact opposite. You're like, oh, I didn't know about this, and then they start kind of piling on. So it's really hard to tell. You're right. The algorithm can be really bizarre.
Yeah, definitely.
One of my most famous
Yeah.
videos before I was a Pacific War channel was Spartan women. People were really into Sparta because of 300 at the time,
Yeah.
but no one knew, oh, what about the female population of Sparta that never gets talked about? I mean, it's very famous, of course, for
Yeah.
those who know.
Yeah.
And it also helped that, like, oh my God, the female audience was like raving about it. I had to make Athenian
Wow.
women after that. I was planning on doing Mongol, like, chief women who had, like, taken power
Wow.
at some point.
Oh, there's some good ones there.
South Korea, the Joseon dynasty
It
had
becomes
like
a playlist all unto itself.
I almost was going to go into the business of female-led history, which would have been
Wow.
interesting, but yeah.
Wow.
Then midway,
Huh.
I made one episode and went viral.
Yeah.
Turned the course.
But back to what we're discussing, 300, right? I like sometimes I want to look at like for whatever reasons I want to look at a Spartan helmet or armor or Greek infantry or whatever. You can't get away from those images on Google. Like the first 10 images are Leonidas from 300, exactly how he was depicted with the pecs and everything. Like
Yeah.
sometimes those things hit and become a phenomenon.
Zack Snyder's a genius for that movie, though.
visual mastermind.
Oh yeah, it was very well
Right.
done. Yeah.
And all of us have to now adapt to what he made in one way or another.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating and exciting. Like what's
Herodotus
going to be
would
the
be
next
happy.
big hit?
Yeah.
Oh god.
And that's with Vikings right now on Netflix.
Yeah,
Valhalla.
yeah.
I really like that
What a big
show.
craze.
Valhalla's it's like it's a lot more straight and narrow now. I really do appreciate the direction they're going with it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's more down to earth than Vikings.
And like hundreds of years of mythical stories with this one family where they do everything.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Back.
you gotta have a protagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ragnar Lothbrok is a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's some cool, new, fresh things that you guys learned recently that you want to share that are kind of like they can be as nerdy as you want, but you can't stop thinking of them.
I learned a lot from you guys speaking. It was a subject I'm very loose on. Like you said, I knew about the Siege of Vienna and the fall of
Yeah,
Constantinople. That was
yeah,
about it.
yeah.
I'm trying to think of. I mean, like, I mean, currently I am reading a book about late Ottoman history, and I'm learning a bunch of like minuscule
Yeah.
types of like
But
events
that's
and
what's
whatnot. But
one thing that's like you're hooked on.
Oh God, I'll tell you guys in a sec. I know I can't say some of it because there's profanity, but
I've been
something good.
I've been doing a lot of reading on Isabella. That's been like my focus at this point. And
Yeah.
along the way, what surprised me is how much everybody around her wanted to knock her out of the line of succession to become, queen or whatever. And she had all these periods of time where she was to be betrothed to somebody else, to get married. And every single time she would dodge the bullet, like again and again and again. There was one time she was being married off to some guy by the name of Pedro Giron, who was this vile, detestable person. And as he was coming to see her to marry her against her will, he got some throat ailment and just like died, like literally in front of her castle. And there was another time she was betrothed to Edward IV of England. She was going to become the Queen of England. And he ends up marrying somebody else. And that kind of saved her. And then she was then betrothed to her brother, Richard, who would go on to be Richard III, who would end up getting just a grisly death at the Battle of Bosworth Field. And the whole Plantagenet line would just basically be disintegrated. So like, it was interesting to me to see her just kind of avoid one thing after another in order to become the person that she was going to become to be. It fascinates me.
Do you think that it was plausible she lost the civil war, and how would the world look like if Portugal, like the Portuguese pretender, took it?
Oh,
I'm not confusing them, right?
I think that Portugal was already well on its way to becoming a world empire. They were doing advances that made everybody else look kind of like, minuscule in comparison. And I think that had they won and united the entire Iberian Peninsula under their banner, I think we would have seen probably a bigger Portuguese empire. I mean, I could be wrong, but they wanted to expand.
Yeah, it's so cool in that treaty. We're like, okay, yeah, you get
what
would
half
become
of the world,
Spain,
the other half. It's
we get the naval
like,
dominance
to the extreme.
Oh, I'm not talking about Tordesillas. I'm talking about the outcome of the Civil War.
Oh, you're talking before that, yeah.
Yeah, because they conceded, okay, we're not getting the pretender on the throne. You get it, but we get, I think it was like some ports and naval control.
Yeah.
So
I mean, at the moment, I'm writing about like early Ottoman history and just going through the primary sources and the lack of primary sources during that period. It's just, I don't know, it's just a pain in the ass.
What would you say was the biggest factor in the Ottoman rise and how explosive it was?
I think geography was really, really important. The fact that the Ottoman Beylik was centered, what was positioned on like the frontiers of the Islamic world. So they had more opportunities to expand, get more manpower, conquer new cities, unlike those other Turkic beyliks in central Anatolia. And let's be honest, like many empires during that period were in huge decline, like the Byzantines, the Serbians and Bulgarians basically decimated them during the 1330s, 1340s.
Yeah.
And then Bulgaria decentralized during the 1350s, and it was split into three parts. And then you have the fall of the Serbian Empire and all the rise of the Serbian nobles, and that just fragmented the Balkans. it was a perfect recipe for Ottoman
The
expansion.
timing was really, really special. But it's
Yeah.
always the Battle of Varna that makes me go, wow, that was
I mean, by the time
one of the
Varna
best what if
happened,
scenarios
the
there.
Ottomans were a reasonable regional
Mhm.
power, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But
but like
imagine your
those,
sultan, like your army gets decimated, your sultan gets captured, and there's this little boy on the throne now without a really good army after a devastating defeat at Varna. Like, to
yeah,
me,
it would have
that's
been
always one of those
GG's.
big what if moments because it came so close. For those of you who don't know, the whole coalition is led by two men. One is John Hunyadi, who is incredibly very good
Talented.
general,
Yeah.
very talented. And then there's this young king who is a unprecedented, I believe, king of Poland, Lithuania, Hungary, and Croatia. So he's got four crowns on his head.
Yes.
Yes, you heard me. Poland and Hungary, a very big, bulky Hungary. And he's young, he's got a lot to prove, and he's the head of this massive coalition with members from all of Europe. You got Venetians, Bulgarians, knights from Germany, and he's got them. He's got them exactly. No, they got him exactly where they want him. Yeah, other way around. The Ottomans have him exactly where they want him.
Yeah.
They do a last stand. The battle's going great. Then he charges straight for the Ottoman, what he thinks is the Ottoman Sultan or his tent. And then his horse uh, steps in a caltrop, like a spike goes all the way through the hoof of the horse. The horse falls and he then gets killed. And with the death, that winning battle suddenly turns into a complete rout. He goes against the orders of John Hunyadi, who said, don't do something as stupid as that. He does exactly that. The coalition disperses. They have to sign a long-term truce. People think that nobody helped Constantinople. No. In 1444, the whole might of Europe was bent on destroying the Ottomans and saving Constantinople. They got completely smashed. Tens of thousands of men. They had to sign a treaty because of the big defeat to not attack them again. And they used the opportunity to take the city. So it's one man's hubris and like almost Alexander moment, almost where you're just charging in, going for it, and it doesn't work out. And what you end up with is one of the biggest and most impactful empires in history.
Yeah, something similar happened during the Battle of Nicopolis, of course. The Crusaders.
Hold on one second. I'll be right back.
All right.
Be right back.
All right. Like the Crusaders, they went into battle way too early. They got demolished later on. And you have like these more talented leaders in the Crusader camp that warned the main Crusader contingent that their battle plan was all wrong. In the Battle of Nicopolis, it was the king of Wallachia. I think his name was Mercia the Elder, and he was really experienced with fighting the Ottomans. A year before the Battle of Nicopolis, he had defeated the Ottomans during the Battle of Rovine. But now he was just another commander in the Crusader army, and his advices were just pushed aside, and the French knights just charged uphill into the Ottoman camp in the forest, and they just got demolished. It's almost like history repeats itself, but I know some people will have an issue with that term, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that keeps on happening.
It's moments like this that make me remember. It's like we live in a modern time when we pulled off World War II, where there were allies, right? There was a coalition of allies who pulled it through, and I think it subdues us to a false understanding that coalitions are better. They're not. They're so much harder to pull off, and you see that in these battles you're talking about. It's so hard when you have a group of people who are talking about they have different cultures, different languages, different backgrounds. It's so difficult to get them to work on one goal. And it's like if one king, if the glue, that king or whatever the thing is, that if they're gone, they get completely routed. And it's one of the reasons why I love the First Crusade so much, because It's one of the few non-modern instances where a coalition of people works against all odds. But it also should make us understand that even in modern times, coalitions are not easy to pull off. And
exactly,
like the Normandy landings, that's not an easy thing to do. It's just not. No matter how much people want to make Nazi Germany later on seem incompetent, like that's a logistical nightmare.
At the end in the West, but yeah.
And not just a
sure.
logistical nightmare, but a political nightmare too.
Yes.
You have everybody that they're all under one command. That's very hard to pull off.
An intelligence nightmare. Netflix is having, I don't know if it's released, but they're making a movie. Did you guys see this? They're making a movie on the operation with the convincing Germany that they wanted to attack Greece and not Sicily.
Oh yeah, Operation Mincemeat.
Yes, is this the one with the dead body with the message in it?
Yeah.
And
they had to find somebody. They had to find a body, and then like half the bodies were like beat up, blown up, the parts missing.
Watch the trailer today because the trailer is really good.
Let's watch it.
The intelligence network on the Allied side was so one-sided when it came to intelligence. It's ridiculous.
I don't get that. How
British, even in World War I, it was the same. Like the British intelligence of World War I was outstanding, and then
but why?
Why is an interesting question. Because they all put resources into it, and they all had unique ways of going about it. Like the Russians had good people intelligence, like they had infiltrators. The Germans, but the British code breaking, the Enigma freaking machine, like they got lucky in both world wars when it came to code breaking, and the Americans too. The Americans broke many of the codes in the they were reading the Japanese traffic at the beginning. Midway is the best example. Like the Japanese went into a trap.
AF, man, AF. That's the one thing that always sticks out to me about Midway. The Americans figured out a way to make the Japanese give away where they were thinking about attacking.
And it's
what
so
was that? A desalinization plant that was broken at AF.
Yeah, the water's broken. We were going to need repairs in the Japanese traffic. There's AF has a water issue. That's
Oh my god!
Okay, Midway.
That was so good.
And if you read Ian Toll,
I want to rewatch that shit. It's such a good movie.
It's good.
Tell me about Ian Toll, because a friend of mine just told me about it. He got his audiobook, and he's been raving about it nonstop ever since.
He's the hottest thing in the Pacific War community. He has a trilogy that's like it's become like the holy grail of how to tell it, because he's kind of encompassed everything perfectly.
Right. And this is a good friend of mine who actually got me into podcasting in the first place. Yeah, he's the one who introduced me to Dan Carlin, and he's been talking volumes about this guy.
Yeah,
he listened to the whole series.
Too. Dan Carlin had an interview with Ian Toll, and I hope to interview him actually pretty soon. But I have to acknowledge something. There's another writer for Kings and Generals who writes a lot of the scripts, and he and me we were butting heads over some issues. And then I started to look at it, and I said to him, what sources are you using? And he told me his sources. I said, I was using Ian Toll for this. And then we started to look at it, and I think Ian Toll sometimes blemishes stuff, but he might put some over drama into his stories. There's a lot of ships that they do get sunk in battles, but for some reason he writes about these extra actions where they do these heroic maneuvers and shoot an extra torpedo or two or an extra salvo, and they're always American. I don't know.
Huh.
It's a minor thing, but I do sense that there might be some over dramatization. But he is one of the best scholars in the subject, so I'm not gonna absolutely read his books, they're excellent. He gets everything so right. He knows exactly what to put in, all the niche details about the people. They're perfect. They're great reads. Even for general audience who doesn't know anything about it, definitely read his trilogy.
Wow.
Yeah. He was telling me about the last Japanese aircraft carrier that they built. It was actually the third ship. It was the Yamato, the Musashi. It was the third super battleship that they converted because they realized, battleships, they just go out and get sunk. It might make sense to build an aircraft carrier, and it basically sailed out and it got sunk by a submarine.
Yeah.
that's
Just
sad.
Japanese were just
know
not
what's-
getting lucky.
What's worse
Um,
than that is the German one. When the Germans had made their super aircraft carrier, and then the Soviets just used it for target practice at the end of the war. That was hilarious. Yeah.
I have a story. I don't remember it very well. I'm gonna give you like some headlines, but it's like the Japanese attack Russia and they sink one of their major ships, and then they
Port
take
Arthur.
that destroyed ship and they make it their own.
Oh, they did this not once. That was the
Yeah,
first time they did it at Port Arthur. They took a few ships, and then they
Yeah.
used them against them at the Battle of Tsushima.
yeah, and
nice.
so like they convert the ship to make the one of their own, and because they're allies with Russia in World War One, they decide to give them that ship.
You know, it
As a
happens more
gift.
often than you think.
Yeah,
The British and the French would steal from each other all the time too. There's all sorts of stories like this. A lot of ships go, they cross over. The Russians
Yeah.
and the Germans constantly stole ships. In World War One, there's a bunch of ships you'll see a tag. This used to be like the Zhuchev or something, but now it's the Prince of whatever.
yeah. And that ship that they gave to the Russians, it sailed all across. It goes to the Baltic, and by then, Russia's in a civil war with the Bolsheviks and is struggling to survive.
So it can't land.
And it's like, I don't remember the details perfectly, but that ship ended up being a prison ship. Like they put
Oh, I
some
heard about that.
500 prisoners on it, and it doesn't do anything else. And because Russia then is like poor and doesn't know what to do with it, they return it to Japan. So it's back in Japan.
so
It's
fun.
such a crazy story to be sunk. And by the way, how was it sunk? Was it one of the ships that was part of the Pacific Fleet, or was it one of the ships that went all across Africa?
The original fleet. So they had two fleets in
Original
the
fleet.
Pacific. They had the Vladivostok fleet, which was
Yeah.
small, and then they had
Yeah.
the fleet at Port Arthur, which was the reason for the Russo-Japanese Wars. This is a warm water port. It was honestly, it's the embodiment of a lot of conflict, and they took the Russians by surprise because the Russians were racist morons who didn't think that the Japanese would sneak up on them, and they got Pearl Harbor basically. And they got put under siege, and while it was a siege, it was a naval blockade. They fought a few battles, then the Japanese just tore the house of cards down, defeated their first navy. The Russians sent a second navy all
That
across
story.
the globe to go
That
and then lose
story,
again.
man.
And then they got
And-
destroyed. Yeah.
And the story of them going all the way around the globe
Crazy.
is it's incredible how fast they did it, but it's what screwed them in the long run, because
Yeah.
all the coaling stations were owned by the British, and the British were allied to the Japanese, so they said keep going.
Crazy. And they locked in the Suez Canal. Crazy.
Yeah, the Russians
Well-
really screwed that up.
That's gonna be a different episode. We can do a whole one on navies and stuff, but for this one, what how far in are we?
I think we're an hour clean, if I'm not mistaken.
Hour clean. All right. We can keep going for a
Hey,
little bit
you,
more.
You had mentioned to the other two guys that something they were researching that they found interesting, and
Mhm.
I think people will love me saying this because it's recently become a meme that I
Okay.
just found out about. I for my own channel, I do it in chronological order. So I've been starting at the Opium Wars, trying to get to the Pacific War. So hilariously, I've done very little about the Pacific War at this point. So I'm at the war.
Oh, Nitin can relate to this a lot.
Yeah. So let's start to talk about the Second World War.
Keep going
Let's
back.
start with the accretion disk that forms the planets, and yeah.
But I'm at the Warlord era period, which is a colossal nightmare to cover. So I even promised myself I wouldn't go in depth, which I screwed that up. It's gonna be 7 episodes. But there's one guy involved in the Warlord era that's become a meme. I don't know if you've heard of him. I mean, his name is Zheng Zongchang, but people know him by Dogmeat General, if you've ever heard that. I'll just read to you why he's so famous. It has nothing to do with him being a general, because he was a warlord. He was like a smaller warlord of Shandong province, which
Yeah.
means he was a referent, like basically anyone who comes from Shandong, like it's the area of the world where there's like so much trouble in China. But this guy is semi-literate, but he's famous for a poem I can't read because it's just it's too many swear words. So if you look him up on Wikipedia, look up
Yeah.
Dogmeat General's poem and you'll know what I'm talking about. But learning about this guy briefly, just to say what people know him for, his legends. He loved to boast about his penis size, which became a local legend. He was a well-known womanizer and a polygamist. At the height of his power, he had about 30 to 50 concubines of different nationalities who he had to give numbers because he couldn't remember their names. And he couldn't speak any other languages either. He also wrote, I don't know what they would call the bastard poem as a semi-literate person. He has another poem that has to do with fornication and geese, which is a whole other thing.
What?
But he's an interesting character because he's not the only Chinese general, but he's like one of the select few who got his hands on some white Russians, not their skin color, like survivors of the Civil War who became mercenaries. And he just learned from them and employed them in battle against the Chinese. And he was like devastating people because he was the guy who figured out armored trains during World War I. And he just like, that was his thing. And in the warlord era, it was just, he's reading the poem for sure.
I'm reading some of the poems.
It's good. Semi-literate guy, eh? He can barely.
Yeah, man, he doesn't beat around the bush. He tells you exactly what's on his mind.
When you know his life, you understand like why the poem is the way it is. It's because in the warlord era, he served other warlords who just like told him to do something, and then he got screwed so many times. So yeah, it's great. Anyone can look it up. Fascinating guy. He, as much as he would sound like just some kind of asshole, he fought to the end. When everyone was surrendering, he was like one of the few guys who stood his ground, and it's really shocking. He ended up fighting everybody else, and he got his ass handed to him. Fled to Port Arthur, actually, and then to Japan, where he killed a politician, and he got caught red-handed assassinating him just because he got drunk one night.
Wow.
Like, crazy guy. This guy's just ludicrous.
Yeah. I love characters like that.
He was fun.
Just give me carnage. Give me carnage.
Yeah, man.
Yep. It's fun to learn about him. And, you got people like, everyone knows, Admiral Yamamoto, the famous Japanese admiral. But a lot of people don't know that he was like an unbelievable gambler. And he wanted to be a casino he wanted to open his own casino in Monte Carlo. That was one of his dreams. And his whole life, he just loved gambling. And he made a ton of money gambling. And he was really into geishas. Like his wife, there's a whole thing when they did a funeral service for him, the geisha, his mistress had shown up. Anyways, it's this whole scandal. And he left stuff to the geisha and stuff. And anyways, the Japanese public didn't like that so much.
Yeah.
Oh.
Famous characters.
Oh man.
Well, I hate to put a damper on this, but I have to start to get going, guys.
All right.
Not only
all right, it's a good note to end on.
But
I figure this is the same as getting invited onto Joe Rogan's podcast. You suffer for like 5 hours.
One moment you're debating why the Hagia Sophia should be destroyed. The next moment it's penises, poems, and geishas.
Yeah.
That should be the name of the podcast, though.
Penis poems.
Penises.
There you go.
Yeah.
And it's about the Ottomans, but
yeah, but we take a side tour.
Well,
big one
on the stuff that matters.
All right, Nitin can leave. We will now say thank you so much for our 2 guests. Again, to the audience, if you haven't already checked out these guys, please just quickly tell us why they should check your channels out. Starting with Nitin.
Well, I think that for anybody that wants a different perspective on some items that really don't get that much press, I'm doing the Reconquista right now. It's a fascinating time period in history, which a lot of people in the history books, you have the Islamic conquest, and then the next paragraph is, and they were defeated, and they were driven out in 1492. That's 781 years in between where something happened, and if you're interested in that, check out my channel.
Okay.
And for my channel, at the moment, I'm just doing museum tour videos with short histories with those museums and I'm doing short, basic videos about Ottoman history. And in the future, I will be doing more history about late Ottoman history, and I can't wait to get up that second episode of the collapse of the Ottoman world. And hopefully, the script will be ready soon. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And to everyone, please like and subscribe to us, or else we can't keep the lights on, I guess, as you say. And check out our Patreon, where we will say Dogmeat's poem. There you go.
Oh yeah.
I'll read it out loud in good voice. Have a good one, guys.
Take care, everybody.